My name is Eleonora, and I am 34 years old. For the last 2 years, since my husband, David, passed away, my family has been gently, lovingly trying to convince me I was losing my mind. It started with small things. My car keys moved from the hook to a drawer, a lunch appointment I supposedly forgot, a bill they claimed I'd already paid. It was all done under the guise of concern for my fragile state after my loss. Their campaign of gentle gaslighting had a goal: to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain power of attorney over my assets and, most importantly, sell the house David and I had shared. What they didn't know was that my late husband, a history professor who valued truth above all else, had left me one final gift. It wasn't money or property, it was a small, unassuming key and a cryptic warning. They thought they were pushing me towards a breakdown. They had no idea they were pushing me towards a truth that would expose them all. If you've ever felt like your reality was being questioned by the very people you should be able to trust, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove sometimes the quietest people have the strongest voices. Before David's death, my life was my sanctuary. We had a love that was quiet and deep, built over 12 years of shared books, late-night talks, and mutual respect. He was a history professor at the local university, and I restored antique books from a small studio in our home. Our house wasn't grand, but it was ours, a century-old craftsman bungalow with a sprawling garden that was David's pride and joy. Our life was filled with the scent of old paper, fresh soil, and brewing coffee. It was a world away from the one I grew up in. My family is ruled by my mother, Catherine, a woman who wields politeness like a weapon, and whose primary concern has always been the flawless public image of the Sterling family. My older brother, Richard, a successful corporate lawyer, is her loyal lieutenant. He inherited her obsession with appearances and her condescending manner. Growing up, their specialty was rewriting history. My childhood shyness was reframed as being thoughtful and observant. Richard's bullying was just strong leadership potential. They were masters of creating a narrative that suited them, and I was always cast in the role of the sweet, slightly fragile, and overly sensitive daughter. David was the only one who saw through it. He called it benevolent manipulation. He noticed how they would dismiss my opinions in a way that sounded like they were protecting me from stress. He saw how they praised my quiet nature because it was convenient for them. He was my anchor to reality, the person who would look at me after a tense family dinner and say, "You're not crazy, they are." When a sudden aggressive illness took him from me, in the space of 3 months, my world shattered. My family swooped in, their concern so thick it was suffocating. They managed the funeral arrangements, they handled the visitors, they filled my house with their presence. At first, I was grateful. I was drowning in grief, and their efficiency felt like a life raft. But soon, the life raft felt like a cage. The gaslighting was a slow poison. It began with my keys. "Oh, honey, you left them in the refrigerator again," my mother would say with a sad smile, even though I knew I had hung them on the hook by the door. Then it was appointments. "Richard and I waited for you at the restaurant for an hour. Don't you remember? We made plans for your birthday." I had no memory of the plan, and my calendar was empty, but their combined certainty made me doubt myself. Was my grief really making me this forgetful? This unreliable? They escalated their campaign when I refused their initial suggestions to sell my house. "It's too much for you to handle alone, Evie," Richard said, using the diminutive name I hated. "The upkeep, the memories, it's not healthy for you to be rattling around in this big old place. We found a lovely modern condo for you downtown. Secure, easy to manage. We could handle the sale of this house for you. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." When I stood firm, their tactics became more insidious.
They started talking about my finances, my ability to manage the estate David had left me. I was looking at the bank statements, Richard said one day, his tone that of a patient lawyer explaining a complex case. You seem to have missed a few payments. Don't worry, I took care of it. I knew I hadn't missed any payments. I had set them all to autopay years ago. But when I checked my account, the record of my payment was gone, and a new one from his account was there. It was like they were creating a fiction of my incompetence complete with forged evidence. The final step was the conversation about power of attorney. Sweetheart, we're worried you're not capable of making sound financial decisions right now. We think it would be best if you let Richard handle things for a while, just until you're feeling more like yourself again. That was the moment a cold sliver of fear cut through my grief-fogged mind. This wasn't concern. This was a coup.
That night, unable to sleep, I wandered into David's study, a room I had barely entered since his passing. It was exactly as he had left it, a testament to a life of intellectual curiosity. I ran my hand over his leather-bound books, his neatly stacked papers, his favorite armchair. On his desk, propped against his monitor, was a sealed envelope with my name on it in his familiar, steady script. My hands trembled as I opened it. The note was short. "My Eleonora," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and they are doing exactly what I feared they would. Your mother and brother will try to make you doubt yourself. They have been doing it your whole life. Do not let them. You are the strongest, most capable person I have ever known. If you ever feel like you're the one who is crazy, you're not. They are. In the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, there is a small lockbox. Inside, you will find a key. It belongs to a safe deposit box at the city bank under my name. The answers you need are there. Trust yourself. Always. All my love, David." Tears streamed down my face. Even in death, he was protecting me. He had seen this coming. He had known what his loss would unleash. I went to the filing cabinet and found the lockbox. Inside was a single, small, old-fashioned brass key. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of a secret I was now meant to uncover. A new kind of energy surged through me, pushing back the fog of grief. I was no longer just a victim of my family's manipulation. I was on a mission, a final quest given to me by the man I loved. The next morning, I told my mother I needed a day to myself to think about their generous offer. Her smile was triumphant. She thought I was finally surrendering. Instead, I drove to the city bank downtown, the key clutched in my hand. The bank manager, an older man who recognized me from visits with David, led me down to the vault with a sympathetic expression. He left me alone in the small, sterile viewing room with the heavy metal box. I took a deep breath and turned the key. The lock clicked open. I lifted the lid, not knowing what to expect. Legal documents? Financial statements? Instead, the box was filled with something far more personal. It was a journal, a small, leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. But it wasn't David's. The handwriting on the first page was elegant and feminine, and the first entry was dated over 60 years ago. I recognized the script from old birthday cards. It was my grandmother's journal. Why would David have his own mother's journal locked away in a safe deposit box? I started to read, and with every page, a hidden history of my family began to unspool. A story of secrets and lies that was far more dark than I could have ever imagined. My grandmother, a woman I had only known as a quiet, proper matriarch, wrote of her husband, my grandfather, a man the family revered as a self-made hero who had built a successful manufacturing business from nothing. The journal told a different story. It told of a business partner, a man named Thomas Willard, who had been my grandfather's best friend. It told of a brilliant invention they had developed together, a new type of industrial valve. And it told of a betrayal. According to my grandmother's pained, guilt-ridden entries, my grandfather had secretly filed the patent for the invention in his name alone, cutting his partner out completely. He used their shared funds to launch the business, leaving Thomas Willard with nothing. The journal detailed the legal battle that followed, a battle my grandfather won using his charisma and connections, painting his partner as an unstable and disgruntled former employee. The final entry on the subject was chilling. Thomas took his own life this morning. He left a wife and a young son. Arthur says it is a tragedy, but that business is business. God forgive us. God forgive me for staying silent. The Sterling family fortune was built on a lie, a theft that had resulted in a man's death. I finally understood. My house, the one David and I had bought, was located in the oldest, most prestigious part of town. It was a symbol of the Sterling family's legacy. My mother and brother weren't just trying to control my finances. They were trying to protect a secret. They were terrified that in my fragile state, I might dig into the family history, perhaps for a book restoration project, and uncover the truth. They needed to sever my connection to that house and its history. They needed to control the narrative, just as they had ever. I closed the journal, my heart pounding with a cold, hard certainty. David hadn't just left me answers. He had left me a weapon. I returned the journal to the box, but not before taking pictures of several key pages with my phone. I walked out of that bank, a different woman. The grieving, pliable widow was gone. In her place was the keeper of a truth that could bring her family's entire world crashing down. I drove straight home and called my mother. "I've made my decision," I said, my voice steady. "I think we should have a family meeting, a final one, at your house. Tomorrow. We can have the lawyer there to finalize the paperwork." "Oh, that's wonderful news, sweetheart," she gushed, relief evident in her voice. "I'm so glad you've decided to be sensible." "Oh, I will be. More sensible than you can possibly imagine." I arrived at my mother's house the next day at the agreed-upon time. The house was a large, modern colonial, immaculately decorated and emotionally sterile. It was a house designed for entertaining, for projecting an image of effortless success. Richard was already there, along with a man in a crisp suit whom he introduced as Mr. Albright, their family lawyer. They were all arranged in the formal living room, a space reserved for important occasions. They looked like a tribunal, and I was the subject of their hearing. My mother was smiling, a warm, benevolent smile that no longer fooled me. Richard looked smugly satisfied. The lawyer looked impatient, ready to get the documents signed and be done with it. "Eleonora, darling," my mother began, gesturing to the single armchair they had left empty for me. "We are so proud of you for making this difficult but wise decision." "It truly is for the best," Richard added, picking up a folder from the coffee table. "Mr. Albright has drawn up all the necessary paperwork for the power of attorney. It's a standard agreement. It will just allow us to manage your affairs until you're feeling stronger." I didn't sit down. I remained standing by the door, a position of transit, not of surrender. "I appreciate you all gathering here," I said, my voice calm and even. "But I think there has been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to sign anything." The smiles on their faces faltered. "What are you talking about, Evie?" Richard asked, his tone sharpening. "You said you had made a decision." "I have," I replied. "I've decided to keep my house. I've decided to manage my own affairs. And I've decided that I'm done letting you control my life and my reality." My mother gasped, placing her hand over her heart in a gesture of wounded shock. "Eleonora, you're not well. Your grief is making you paranoid." "Am I asked. "Is it my grief that made you move my keys? Is it my grief that made you invent appointments I never agreed to?"
Is it my grief that made you manipulate my bank account to make me look incompetent?" Richard stood up, his professional demeanor slipping. "That is a serious accusation. We were trying to help you." "No, you were trying to control me, and I know why." I walked over to the coffee table and placed my phone down, displaying a crystal-clear image of a page from my grandmother's journal, the entry about my grandfather stealing the patent. "I believe you are all familiar with the story of Thomas Willard?" I asked. The color drained from my mother's face. Richard stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Their lawyer, Mr. Albright, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he read the text. "Where did you get that?" Richard demanded, his voice a hoarse whisper. "David left it for me," I said. "He left me everything I needed to understand the truth about how this family's fortune was really made. On a stolen invention, on the ruin of a good man, on a secret my grandmother was forced to keep her entire life." I swiped to the next picture, the entry about Thomas Willard's suicide.
You were so afraid I would find this, weren't you? Afraid that I, the book restorer, the keeper of old things, would stumble upon the one story you couldn't rewrite? That's why you needed to get me out of that house. That's why you needed to control my life. It was never about my well-being. It was about protecting a lie. "This is a private family matter," Mr. Albert said, finally speaking. "It has no bearing on the current situation regarding your competency." "Doesn't it?" I countered, turning to him. "Doesn't a conspiracy by family members to gaslight a grieving widow in order to protect a 60-year-old secret of fraud and potential wrongful death have bearing? I wonder what a judge would think. I wonder what the ethics board of the state bar would think about one of their members, your client Richard, participating in such a conspiracy." Mr. Albert paled. He looked at Richard, who suddenly seemed less like a master of the universe and more like a cornered animal. "I am done," I announced, my voice ringing with a finality that silenced the room. "I am done being your fragile, sensitive, unreliable Eleonora. I know the truth now, and the truth has given me a very clear perspective." I looked at my mother and brother, seeing them clearly for the first time, stripped of the roles they had played for so long. They were just two scared people, desperately trying to keep a dark secret buried. "You are going to leave me alone," I said. "You will drop this entire charade about my incompetence. You will never again mention me selling my house or signing over control of my life. You will treat me with the respect I deserve, and in return, your perfect family's dirty little secret will remain just that, a secret." I let the offer hang in the air. It was a deal made in the language they understood best: leverage and self-preservation. But if you ever try to manipulate me or question my reality again, I will take this journal and every piece of evidence David collected, and I will go public. I will tell the story of Thomas Willard to every newspaper and television station in this state. I will ensure that the sterling name is no longer associated with success, but with the theft and tragedy it was built on. I picked up my phone from the table. The choice is yours. The family legacy is in your hands. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them in the ruins of their carefully constructed world. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew with absolute certainty that I had just won my life back. The silence from my family was immediate and absolute. It was as if I had ceased to exist. There were no more concerned phone calls, no more unannounced visits, no more subtle suggestions about my well-being. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and they were terrified of the leverage I now held. The quiet was a relief, but it was also profoundly lonely. In exposing their lies, I had also severed the final frayed threads of our relationship. The months that followed were a period of quiet rediscovery. I worked in my studio,
The familiar, methodical process of restoring old books, a balm to my soul. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from during David's illness and my subsequent grief, and I spent hours in the garden, finding a strange comfort in nurturing the plants David had loved. But the secret I held felt like a heavy weight. The story of Thomas Willard and his family haunted me. David hadn't just left me the journal as a weapon, I realized. He had left it as a responsibility. He, the historian, would have known that a story like this needed a resolution, not just a cover-up. I started digging, using the university's archives, a resource David had taught me how to navigate. I searched for information on Thomas Willard. I found old newspaper articles about the legal dispute with my grandfather, all of them slanted in my grandfather's favor. I found Thomas's obituary, a small, sad notice that mentioned he was survived by his wife, Eleonora, and a son, Michael. With that information, I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by David's lawyer. I didn't want to find them to threaten them or expose a family feud. I wanted to understand the full impact of my grandfather's betrayal. The investigator found him within a week. Michael Willard, now in his late 60s, was living in a small town a few hours away. He was a retired high school science teacher. His mother, Eleonora, had passed away a decade ago. He had never married and had no children. The investigator's report included a brief financial summary. Michael Willard lived a modest life on a teacher's pension. The ripple effects of my grandfather's actions 60 years ago were still evident. The wealth and opportunity that should have been his had been diverted to my family, leaving him with a life of quiet struggle. For weeks I debated what to do. What was my responsibility here? The crime was my grandfather's, not mine, but the fortune was now mine, and it was tainted. David would have wanted me to do the right thing. I finally wrote a letter to Michael Willard. I didn't reveal my identity. I simply introduced myself as a historical researcher who had come across his father's story and was interested in learning more. I included my email address and hoped for a response. He replied 2 days later. He was cautious, but curious. We exchanged a series of emails, and he shared his side of the story. He spoke of a father who was a brilliant inventor, a man broken by the betrayal of his best friend. He spoke of a mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, and who never lost her bitterness. He spoke of a childhood marked by poverty and the constant shadow of what could have been. His emails were not filled with anger, but with a deep, lingering sadness. Finally, I knew what I had to do. I wrote him one last email. "Mr. Willard," I wrote, "my research was not purely academic. My name is Eleonora Sterling. Arthur Sterling was my grandfather." I told him everything. I told him about the journal, about my family's attempts to control me, and about the secret I now carried. I ended the email with an invitation. "I cannot undo the past," I wrote, "but I also cannot live my life knowing it is built on an injustice. I would like to meet with you, if you are willing. I believe there is a conversation to be had about restorative justice." His reply was simple. "I will be there." We met in a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our 2 towns. Michael Willard was a tall, gentle-looking man with kind eyes and the stooped shoulders of someone who has carried a weight for a long time. I was terrified he would be filled with rage, that he would see me as the living embodiment of the family that had destroyed his. But he was just quiet, his gaze searching. I had brought the journal with me. I didn't offer him platitudes or empty apologies. I simply slid it across the table. "This is my grandmother's," I said. "I think you have more right to it than I do." He opened it and began to read. I watched as 60 years of private history unfolded before him. I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes as he read about his father's despair, the quiet anger as he read about my grandfather's deceit, and a surprising flash of compassion as he read about my grandmother's lonely, trapped existence. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet with tears. "All these years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother always said my father wasn't crazy, that he wasn't a failure. No one believed her. I believe her," I said softly. We talked for hours.
I told him about David and how I suspected David had been trying to find him before he died. I told him about my family's reaction, their fear, their self-preservation. He told me about his life, the opportunities he had missed, the quiet path he had chosen. There was no talk of money, no demands, no accusations. It was just two people from opposite sides of a historical crime, finally acknowledging the truth together. As we prepared to leave, I took a deep breath and made my offer. "I have a proposal for you," I said. "This isn't charity and it isn't a payoff. I see it as a long overdue debt. The Sterling Company was built on a patent that was half yours. My lawyers have estimated what half the company's value would have been, with interest, over the last 60 years. It's a significant number." He started to protest, but I held up my hand. "I want to create a foundation in your father's name, the Thomas Willard Innovation Grant. It will fund young, unknown inventors and engineers, people like him who have brilliant ideas but lack the resources to bring them to life. I want you to be on the board, to help select the recipients, and I want to provide you, personally, with a settlement that reflects your father's stolen legacy. It won't change the past, but it can change your future, and it can allow your father's name to be associated with creation and opportunity, not with tragedy." He was silent for a long time, looking out the window. When he turned back to me, his expression was one of profound, weary relief, as if a burden he had carried his entire life had finally been lifted. "Yes," he said simply, "I think my father would like that."
It has been a year since that meeting. The Thomas Willard Innovation Grant is now a reality, and it has already funded its first 3 inventors. Michael and I speak on the phone every week, serving on the board together. We have formed an unlikely friendship, 2 people bound by a shared, complicated history. The settlement allowed him to retire comfortably and pursue his own quiet hobbies. He sends me pictures of the boat he bought, the one his father had always dreamed of owning. I sold my mother's house, the sterile colonial that was a monument to a lie. I gave her and Richard a portion of the proceeds, enough for them to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. It was a final, transactional gesture. I sent it with a simple note: "This closes the account." I have not heard from them since, and I don't expect to. Our relationship was built on a shared secret, and with that secret resolved, there was nothing left to hold us together. I still live in the house David and I shared. It is no longer a place of secrets and grief. It is a place of peace. I have filled it with new memories, with the laughter of friends, with the quiet satisfaction of my work. My grandmother's journals are now in a university archive, part of a collection on local history, donated anonymously. Her story is preserved, but the names are protected. I learned that truth is a more complex thing than I had imagined. It isn't always a weapon that destroys. Sometimes it can be a tool to rebuild. David left me a key not just to a secret, but to a resolution. He trusted me to not just uncover the truth, but to do the right thing with it. My family thought my greatest weakness was my fragility, but in the end, my greatest strength was my ability to restore things, not just old books, but a piece of a broken past. And in doing so, I finally restored myself. Have you ever had to right a wrong from a previous generation? How do you balance family loyalty with moral responsibility? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, please hit like and subscribe for more real-life stories about the complexities of family and truth. Remember to share this video with anyone who believes in the power of restorative justice. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to not just face the truth, but to act on it.